Hi there and welcome. This is Derek Feldman. Excited to be with you today. It's September the 2nd, and it's the third part of our four-part series on doing multi-channel campaigns before we start working with you this fall to get ready for your end-of-year campaign. So we're excited for the five groups here that are joining us at Festival of Children because all of you have been selected, of course, as you know, to be a part of this program to help you not only with your end of year campaigns, but to help also provide some educational information as to how to create those campaigns as well. I'll get more into some of the things that will be coming your way over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. In addition, I know that my colleague Jeremy Morris has been in contact with you to talk further with how things are going with your campaigns in general. And so now it's time to get started in planning, obviously, towards the end of the year. And that will culminate with a session that we'll have in October, of course, around the organization of the multi-channel campaign. Today's discussion, though, is around email marketing, primarily email fundraising. And what we're going to do is actually walk through what and how these emails that you're going to get from us that are going to be designed for your end-of-year campaigns, why are they structured the way they are? Why are they written the way they are? Why are they designed the way they are? All of those to try and get the highest rates of response in general when we look at building awareness and, of course, building that fundraising performance level that you currently have. If you haven't already gone, go to the achieveguidance.com/FOCF section of the website. That's where you can download all of the past materials, including the presentations. You can watch some of the video webinars. There's some great examples on there, of course, too. So make sure that you head there. And that's where this session, which that we're recording right now, will be there later on, too. The other thing that we did, thanks in large part to GoToWebinar's new infrastructure that they have on your screen, is that you can, as we speak, download the handouts. The handout for this presentation is the presentation itself. You can look at that in your viewer panel right here. Right on the right-hand side, it should say Handouts 1 of 5. Go ahead and download that if you want to print it out or put it on another screen if you'd like to, and use that as we go through today's presentation. But again, go to the achieveguidance.com/FOCF, achieveguidance.com/FOCF to download the webinar recording as well as the presentation from today. Give us a couple days to make sure we get everything up there for you too. All right, so let's talk about email. The purpose of email, as we look at it in general, is to try and spark an impulsive reaction to giving in general. Because the email environment itself is actually one that is what we would say is just really, really impulsive in nature. Let me give you a couple stats to help you think through this a little bit. One is that an email has about no more than a half hour worth of longevity, meaning that after that half hour, that response time is going to be extremely slow because there isn't the email is considered dead after that. Now, don't get me wrong, you're probably going to have some donors, some constituents that are still reacting to it, but in general, you got about a half hour after sending an email to try and get a reaction. The other thing about email is that actually in fundraising, it is really the largest contributor, email fundraising is, to online giving. Here's a couple other stats to think through. And if you look at our overall giving in the United States, online giving accounts for 7% of all philanthropic giving. So 7% of all giving is attributed to online giving. Of that 7%, 90% of it, 90% of all online gifts are coming in through email, are coming in what we call a direct response mechanism, which is email primarily. And only really 1% is coming in from social media. So if we look at the stats, email is our best transaction environment to try and raise money online. Now, although I would love, of course, to have as much as possible to try and get more people to give online, we really see most of that online giving coming from this email environment because you're telling them in some persuasive way that we need you to give. And it's really in that instance that the individual is making a decision. They'll either quickly dismiss it or they'll go forward and actually start to give. Versus in a direct mail environment which we've talked about in previous times, where direct mail has a little bit of a longer time span. We usually say it's got about a month to about 4 to 6 weeks on average. And because it's quickly dismissed, there is a positive of this, is that we can get a sense of how people are really interacting with our messaging, how people are not only that using that interaction, but how people are being influenced by email to transact in general. Because here is what we know, is that we live in a multi-channel world today, right? And we've had this brief conversation in the past where we have these donors and individuals, and they're no longer considered an online donor or a direct mail donor, an email donor. They're a donor. And because they're not considered in either one of those camps or categories, primarily because the individual gives through many impulsive ways. At a moment, if we inspire them enough and we ask them in person, then they're going to give. And then they could later go home 2 months later and give via email. And then maybe 3 months later respond to a direct mail. We know, and the research tells us, that donors transact based upon impulse, and they transact based upon their interest at the time of trying to enact that passion and empathy within them. And because that exists, we don't have an in-person asking donor or an email donor and all these, is that in the combination of all of our tools, email, personal asking, your newsletter, all of these things help add value to whenever they do transact. And one key way to look at it and measure it is, even if your email underperforms, where if you send an email solicitation and nobody at all transacts in it, but you had, let's just say 50 people opened it, you should take those 50 people that opened it and cross-reference with those that actually gave offline, where the email might have sparked them to act in other ways, which obviously still helps you. And if it wasn't for the email, you may not have received that gift. So even if your response is low, that's all right, because we need email to help trigger a reaction in other places. It becomes more actionable in that amount, right? It's not, we don't have the time in the email to spend so much energy into a narrative that we can in direct mail. And so we have to make it very actionable and action-oriented. Why me as the individual really, really needs to get out there. And probably one of the most significant actionable pieces that we'll see in email fundraising or email marketing in general is from our friends at the Environmental Defense Fund, or really any environmental organization. One thing I recommend is that you actually go out and sign up for their emails. They're very good at trying to get you to act as many times as you can. And they do several other things really, really well. Now, the length here is longer, and it's letter style, which is not necessarily the ideal. But what they do is that they brand the individual. You see Heather towards the bottom. So Heather Shelby is the Action Network coordinator. And you'll notice if you sign up for their emails, she is constantly branded with all of the communication that you'll receive. She's the one that you'll start to hear from on a consistent basis that's trying to get you to do something, whether it's to sign a petition or to even give. And as you look here, the other things that they do really well, obviously, is branding my personal name in there, using some sort of image to try and spark something, and continued ways to really hyperlink the action they want me to take. I encourage you to sign up for their emails only because you can start to see some of their language is just very actionable. The images brought tears to my eyes. A chill fell over me and goosebumps raised along my arms. All of this very intensified language helps to spark interest and action potentially in the individual. But email is an action area. It is, and some will say, well, Derek, we have an email newsletter. Well, you should look at email newsletter content versus your regular fundraising appeals that are done in email. What you'll start to notice is that your email newsletters, although newsworthy and might get good open rates, they don't get a lot of click-through rates because they're not actionable items, right? And the public requires you to keep them in a state of asking, or at least pushing them towards doing something for the cause or mission. Before we get forward into some of the other things, we have to make sure that we're all on the same page. And this will be really important when we go through the end of year campaign planning with you too as well. So these are some common vocabulary terms that are used, and we'll probably use these too as well. So I want to go briefly through these just to make sure that as I bring up these terms later on, that you have an understanding of what I'm discussing. So first, when we think about deliverable emails, you have a list that might say you have 5,000 people on that email list. Those 5,000 names are not necessarily always all delivered to. So what we will ask you sometimes is, tell us the emails that were delivered. These were the emails not including this that were not sent inbound. So we want to know the ones that were actually delivered into the inboxes. Sometimes what we'll look at is that we want to know, how is your email campaigns? Because remember, we said 90% of all online giving is attributable to these email campaigns. And the other 10% is, I happen to be along and I get inspired in some way when I went to your website and I gave. We call this unsolicited web giving. And that means that I happen to visit you and whatever you had on your site in that moment really triggered me to react there. So if you think about it, 90% email, the other 10% is this unsolicited web giving based upon somebody's interest in the time. A click-through rate, or what you'll oftentimes CTR, is the number of people who clicked on any trackable link in the email divided by the number of delivered emails in itself. So if we had 5,000 people that actually got the email and only 10 people that obviously clicked on something, it's a very low click-through rate. So we want to try and get that much higher. And so what it probably means is that the message didn't inspire them to act in that moment. Although it might have been a knowledgeable message, might have been something very informative, it didn't necessarily incentivize the action to occur there. Open rates is something that you'll often hear in the field too, which is these are the number of email messages opened divided by the number of delivered emails too. So how many people actually opened it? If you get a lot of people to open it and not a lot of people to transact, probably not directing them solely enough to it. You might have additional messaging in there. For instance, if it's a fundraising appeal, we don't do anything else but ask for money in that email. But if you happen to have an email where, let's say you have what's happening right now, the next event you can sign up, all of these different types of things, that might inhibit you from getting a high click-through rate to take the action, versus it might just get people to open it. So we want people to click through as well. We want people to go all the way through. The unsubscribe rate, as you can imagine, is the number of people who, after you send them their email, they unsubscribe from it. And you should note that unsubscribe rates tend to be very common, and they tend to be something that is going to happen. People are going to unsubscribe. Page completion rates. So this is, if we take the people that actually opened it and then clicked on the button to donate and then actually made a gift to you, we call that the completion rate. We want to know how many people actually completed the form, went all the way through the system, versus opened it, versus clicked on, and then those that click on, you will have some that won't follow all the way through. So we want to know all the way through how many people got to the end. A targeted email is a language that we'll use because we're going to look at maybe targeting a segment or a population of your email list, if you have subdivided it that way, of course, if you've segmented it, that we might want to look at. What's always good to do is to create various groups in email. So for instance, if you're using a Constant Contact, a MyEmma, MailChimp, any of these that are out there, you can do this. You always want to establish different populations. And one of the things that we'll see oftentimes is newsletter list. Well, the problem with just saying newsletter list is that we don't know how those people got into that list or what they represent. So when people are signing up for your newsletter, it's good to not only get them signed, but to try and build a little bit of a profile, to put people into groups. So donors or volunteers, just a regular constituent, to something, to whatever kind of audiences you have. And then when you send the email, you can either target one population or you send the same email to every single group and see how each group responds separately to the emails, and that will help guide you. Of course, one good population in the donor category in fundraising is you have donors that you would consider at the lower levels. Those might be your $0 to $100 donors. Donors maybe that we would call the mid-level donors, maybe like 100 to 500. And any donor between 500 and say your biggest gift, your major donors too. And you'll start to see if there's any correlation or any changes between good donor groups as well. So it's always good practice to try and break down your big list into subgroups so that you can start to analyze how they all respond differently or maybe all the same to the types of messages that you're getting out there. So make it part of your goals and your marketing plans. A full file or your full house file is something you'll often hear about too. And that's basically that full list of people. That's that 5,000. You might say, I have 5,000 names, but I've got, 1,000 of those 5,000 are donors. And of those 1,000 that are donors, I've got 3 camps, 3 groups, my mid-level, my major donors, and my lower level donors, so that we can get a sense of, well, who are all of these people? Who is this list of 5,000, the big house file list? A response rate, of course, is those that respond to a request of action outside of donation, of course. So they could, if you want them to act in some way in the email, that might be watch this, view this, share this. Those are all response rates to the action that you're creating. List churn. So this is a big piece because we have to understand what's happening in the field when it comes to the churn rate. Now, churn is those that become unreachable in a 12-month period. And list churn happens, whether it's in email addresses or phone numbers, text messages, whatever it is the case, is that these individuals become dormant in our list. And it's common in the field that this will occur because in email, we've got 2 kinds of addresses. We've got our primary address and we've got our secondary email address. And so depending, and we always want to get the primary email address because that's the one that you use, obviously, primarily most of the time. And if we can get that one, we can pretty much be in front of them consistently. And when we get a secondary email address, those might go bad, or maybe they switch jobs or do something else, is that it becomes undeliverable as you go forward and it starts adding to your churn. So in essence, if we think about all of these terms, that will help us get through when we are starting to discuss, well, how come email 1 didn't perform? Let's figure out what the open rate was, how many people really got it, the completion rate, the CTR rate, click-through rates, all of those things, just so that we can get a better sense of where we can potentially help you improve really, really quickly. If we look overall at the U.S. nonprofit population, let's look at some averages nationwide, and it would be a good practice for you to see how you compare to the averages out there in the country. So right now, on average, there is going to be about what we call an email churn rate of 16%. What that means is 16% is going to be the percentage of those that are no longer going to want to receive your information via email. They'll unsubscribe, their emails go bad, or they're undeliverable in some way, that list churn rate. So 16% of it. On average, nonprofits in the country gain 15% more than what they had last year. If you look at the numbers, there's more people, a little bit, a percentage higher people that will turn over than we are growth. So one thing to note is that as you develop your marketing plans, is your goal in marketing should be to acquire an email contact. Because by acquiring that email contact, we're not only making up for our losses, but it will also help us, obviously, ask more people for more money or ask people for money. If we don't have more contacts, then it becomes a numbers game. You raise more money when you can ask more people. It's very simple math. And if your list is churning over at a rate of, say, 16%, and you're only gaining 15 or 12%, 10% of emails, your list is actually decreasing over time, and eventually you obviously can see where this would go, is that your list will be inoperable as you go forward. So a key marketing strategy every year should be, how are we going to, we need to figure out what is our churn rate. How many people do we get unsubscribes, undeliverables on average in a year? And then we need to account for not only making up for that loss, but also adding to it too as well. So you might get, I often see in organizations where one of their marketing goals is increase the email file by 20%. And the reason why is because they're accounting for the loss that they're going to have. And they're also accounting for it, adding in addition to the numbers that they're trying to equate out from that loss. So as you look at it right now, big piece for you to do is figure out how fast your emails are unsubscribing, your churn rate, and then look at creating a goal of gaining more than that, obviously, in the next year. And how do you gain more? Is using email for as many things as you can. So everything from asking for email to send donation receipts to, using email for registrations and special events, when you're out in fairs, festivals, all those things, and you're tabling, as much as you can. And on your website in particular, is even potentially at times doing a pop-up that could be done. It talks about giving your email if you want more information on what we're doing, those kinds of things. So make sure that your website, your digital presence, makes it a prominent feature to take action in that area by asking people to give us their email to sign up. When we look at email solicitations, this is just solicitations, not newsletters, not any other communication, solicitations alone. Here is some of the data that we got. On average, nationwide, 13% is the actual open rate for fundraising solicitations. And in the month of December alone, it could be even a little bit smaller because we're getting so much email that's occurring during that month, given the end of year campaign season. A click-through rate. So after they open it, 0.42% total of the larger group is the number of people that will actually click all the way through. And those that respond or complete it from a donation standpoint, 0.07. And on average, too, if you send a fundraising appeal, 0.22% of the total list will unsubscribe from that fundraising appeal. So here's some good data that you can benchmark yourself against, and something that we will be benchmarking you against when we get towards the fall, when we're working on that email campaign with you. And if you're curious right now, the one-time gift is actually higher in online than it is in offline. Offline, it's in your high 20s, low 30s. It switches around $1 every other year or so, but just basically know high 20s, low 30s. And then the average monthly gift is about in line with what the average monthly gift is offline, which is in your lower 20s, offline to mid 20s, and in this case, $19 online. So what that means is some people say, gosh, Derek, the stats don't look good. Why on earth would we do email? Well, we already talked about why we should do email earlier. For one, is the influence it can have in other areas of giving, like through transactions in direct mail and so forth. The other reason is that this is just one email. If you combine this one email with 2 other emails that you're going to be sending during the month of December, that in combination, so 3 emails, that can potentially be the same amount that would be if you bought a list in direct mail too as well, a small percentage. And in terms of that, you're also raising higher dollar per person that comes in versus what you would do in a direct mail. Now, you should know, though, is that long-term, online donors don't give as much long-term as direct mail donors do. They tend to, but that's where you can change that curve for your own organization by doing stewardship and so forth. The other thing that's fairly interesting is that after somebody gives online, if you send them a direct mail in the next solicitation time, the next campaign, they'll give through your direct mail. They don't stay in that channel like we talked about earlier. So you can get them into a direct mail status after that. And you should, because one of the things that's been found through the transaction research that's been done is that brand awareness was established in the online and email environment. So once they got the direct mail appeal, although they might have not read it, they had skimmed it, it was already established for that reaction to go forward. So that's why we get some good response rates when it comes to direct mail. Okay, now let's talk about the email in general. How should it look and why? So if you look here on the left-hand side, what you're going to notice is what we call a wireframe. A wireframe is simply a graphical way to place content, imagery, and materials within the email in how it will flow and lay out. This on the left-hand side is a very successful layout that's not only been proven with us, but others too as well. So let's kind of break each part of this down here quickly. So as you look on here, you're going to notice that there is on the top what we would call a donor-centric statement. We want to start with content and not the imagery. What that donor-centric statement does at the top, at the very top, is that it helps me understand what this is and how it relates to the campaign theme and how I'm a part of that. So for instance, you're going to see later on in some of these emails, a bolded sentence at the top that's text that will relate to the theme and relate to me and create a statement of relevancy as well. Here's why we put that statement towards the top. Because when you are looking at it, we call this pre-header text. Because when you're looking at that within a mobile device and even in an Outlook environment, that statement is the first line that will happen underneath the subject line that you'll see in a preview pane. So if you were to take out your phone right now, you're more than welcome to if you're not. In your phone, go to your inbox. What you'll see in your inbox is who sent you a message, the subject, and the first two lines of what that email has in it. That's the same sentence and statement of relevancy, this donor-centric statement that we would want at the top. For those of you who have started using with just imagery towards the top, what you're doing is you're missing a message opportunity because that could influence the individual from going into and opening the email. So to increase open rates, we want that message as text above there so that mobile, which is where mostly email is read to, can take that message and inspire the individual to act. So don't lead with graphic towards the top, lead with a donor-centric statement or a statement of relevancy. Then having an image and then your text and copy and then simply donate. On the bottom, you can have your organization, website, all that other stuff. Some of you may be wondering, Derek, how come our logo isn't towards the top? You're sending it. They have opted into your emails. You are branded already when you send it with your name. Let's not waste time. Let's get them into the image of a person and an individual you're trying to help. Let's inspire them to act in that way. The other thing is that this is what we call a single column design. Please do not use a left hand on the other side here, a left hand navigation or anything on the left hand side. Single column, one column all the way down. It's easier to flow up and down in your mobile device and it shows up really nicely. And then lastly, nothing else is in this except for donating. This is a fundraising appeal, not time to inform per se outside of asking for money or relative to the statement that you have there. When you think about your content overall, you're going to need to cut it after you write it by about a third. So less than 200 words is ideal. Now remember, hopefully that this donor or potential donor has received direct mail and some other devices too as well. So this is not necessarily the first time that they've heard about it. But our goal in this piece is to inspire them to act in that moment. We want them to give. We want them to get started and going much further and faster. Find images then, after you've done that you've used or that you have created during the direct solicitation copy, so the direct mail too as well. You can use your image of the person that you're talking about. We want faces, of course, in that image and graphic there. And as you saw in the other email, we want these illustrative words. Remember that Environmental Defense Fund email? I got goosebumps. I've got all these things. It's very illustrative, colloquial type style, tone, and language to help inspire somebody to act in the moment too. So let's take a look at one. Here's an example. This is Building Tomorrow. If you see above there, you see the text. If you're looking for last minute gifts, remember concrete is greater than coal. You probably won't realize what that is. This organization spent some time educating their base over the course of about 2 months prior to this solicitation about the benefits that concrete can have than coal in these communities in Africa that they're working on. And so as you see this here, they also wanted to talk about how their donors can get involved in certain aspects as well. So that's the amount of words that you would see. The layout is very familiar there too. Here's one, which is, this is BOSMA, Visionary Opportunities. And you'll notice at the top there, do you remember your first job out of school? Donor-centric statement, statement of relevancy, right? So I do remember my first job. And that's one of the first things that would entice them to then open the email. So the campaign theme was jobs changes everything. If you'll notice, very short amount of language in there, personalized. $100 ask, and all images lead to donate. The brand is on the bottom because right after that statement at the top, we didn't want to put the brand up there. You wanted to have the individual that we're talking about, that face. It happens to have a cute dog too, which isn't bad. But yes, we want to have the image of the face or the person that you're trying to help. Single column all the way down and leads to donate. Now, you can have other clickable links in here, but they should only go to the donate page. This is not a time, if you can't educate them through the email, them going to another page to then be educated further, like your program pages, and then decide from those program pages and then go donate, it is not a sequence often followed. And if it is, they are the outliers. So what we want to do is not link them to educational content. We should be able to inform through the education content directly in this email to inspire them to act right there. Here's another one, as you can see here, single column using an individual's face all the way down to donate. This as well, as you can see, is a personalized lead-in intro at the top of relevancy. So Derek, devoted parents care for a child with developmental disabilities all their lives, yet their loving attention is overshadowed by a looming fear, who will care for our child when we're gone? So statement of relevancy, bringing it in, and then as you can see, the organization is branded underneath this. This is the 3-part sequence that goes with it. So the first one was an email that was first sent to introduce the campaign and the Dragoo family, as you can see there. You can see their family photo and picture. The second email was taken from a different vantage point, a little bit shorter because we've garnered their attention. We want them to just act in this way. And then the third email you see on the right there, this is a thank you email. You should always be changing the automated email that happens after the donation occurs. Continue to brand it, and brand it potentially even with the family. This is the Dragoo family again. And if you notice, lots of donor-centric language in this one. Your gift made all the difference. Thank you. We encourage you to stay up to date and learn more. This is the chance where you can bring them over to the site to learn more. Here is the opportunity, not during the solicitation. We want to keep them there because the only thing we want them to do is donate. But in the automated piece, that's a place where you could say, head to our events or go to this place to learn more. Those are all great opportunities for you to have in that automated component. All right, so now as we go through the email checklist, there's a couple things that we want to make sure that we have, regardless in this piece. So here is a pretty good tool to help you get there. The first one, things to consider before actually creating your email. Remember the segmentation. Will you be sending a universal email, or will there be variations based upon donor history? Those are options that you should consider. What we have noticed, obviously, is that I would highly recommend that you segment out your major donors in this piece. It's not an ideal piece to send to them. You should be focused on securing their gift in an offline mentality or offline mode through either phone, in-person meeting. Board members are calling those individuals too. The other thing is that segmentation for not only how the donor is or the donor history right now is important, but also suppressing anybody that has already given. It's important that they don't continue to get emails, but that they could, from this standpoint, be moved through the process. So even if a donor gives offline, like through direct mail, send them the thank you automated email that you saw earlier, right? So here's peek again. This third email on the right, the last email there on the right, that could be something you could send every direct mail donor to to ensure that they could go find out new information or more information if you wanted to. And it's a good piece because assuming that you're probably talking about the same family in the direct mail piece, it's a great piece to have in there. So segmentation should be done based upon different groups of audiences, based upon donor levels. So you can see how your donors at the lowest level, the mid-level, and others would respond. Segment out major donors unless you feel like it's imperative to have them in there. If you're obviously, the best thing is for you to go out and privately have those conversations. Look at how your constituents who have been volunteers, or if they've been a special event attendee, how they compare to others too as well. In the first message, I would always recommend that that first message be sent uniformly to everybody. The second message is the time where you can potentially customize more to try and get a better reaction. But first one, that's your base. Create a baseline in each campaign. In the first one, send it to everybody, see how the various groups respond, to then determine whether or not you should need to segment content in the email. And that is things like, we are so thankful that you're volunteering. You continue to do that, and you need to give now because you're a volunteer. So you can change the message a little bit. If it's the first time asking for donations by email, or do you have a history of giving responses from email, I have found the first time that you ever send an email solicitation, if you've never done it, you tend to get a really great reaction because people aren't used to you doing it. But over time, you'll plateau in email, and then hopefully it'll go back up and increase. That's incredibly common. Personalization is important in email too. Lots of use statements, donor-centric language, and making sure that you have my first name in certain things if you can. If you don't, please do not do a dear friend, dear first name. Take that all out and just go right into the copy. Now, personalization in terms of MailChimp and all these different, MailChimp, GoTo, or Constant Contact, all of these different programs have a personalization component to it that you can add in. You could even add a personalized subject line where it says, Derek, in the subject line, we really need your help right now. That could be your number 2 email to try and inspire action, of course. Who will this email be from? In the beginning, I highly recommend that your emails come directly from the organization. Again, we want to create a baseline. Your second email could come, say, from an executive leader, like your executive director, or you, if the base knows who you are. That's a great opportunity as well. And then lastly, I would say, as you look at who it's from, is that if you try to use somebody in a sender line that's not really well known with the base, and I'm not talking celebrity status, but if you try to use a program person, like for instance in the last email, like the Dragoo family, that would have been very difficult because not a lot of people know the Dragoos. So it wouldn't inspire people to open. And remember, this is not like a direct mail where I'm going to see it regardless, potentially. It's an email, so I can delete it with knowing just who the name is in the subject line. All right, let's talk about design. What imagery is available? Obviously, we want people's faces as much as possible. You saw that piece from Bosma. Adam's face was there. And ensuring that that image ties into the rest of the direct mail appeal, the rest of the website, create a home page as well that shares that image too. If you don't have a graphic designer to kind of brand some of these unique elements in it, here is a couple of simple tools that you could do. One is that even using a photo and an image, and next to it with a black box with white lettering in it saying give now, will stand out more than anything else. Anytime you want somebody to take an action, block that action out, block it with a larger color and with a white text or something that has an inverse like that. Make people, so you see how the letter design is on here. That design stands out. If you right now blinked 3 times, blink real quick at the screen, each time you blinked, you're going to see the word design. That's the same thing we want to do with your donate button. With your buttons or in your direct mail appeal, call out the action as much as you can. If you have some video, it's always great to use as an added value. You need to, though, ensure that the video is not long or overly informative and that it relates to the call to action. There still has to be an action at the end of the video if you're going to use it for an email. And if there is any other relevant content, use that to link to in the piece that's the thank you. Try not to have all these separate links that are going to occur in the content areas. All right, now let's talk about content in themselves. Remember how much we said? We said about 150 to 200 words at max. Hopefully you can get it down there. Start writing and then cut it by about a third. What are the stories of the program participants that you could use? And the good thing about the stories is you could tell them from various vantage points. So your email 1 might just be about who the Dragoo family is. Remember that piece? And then email 2 could be, well, this is from a person that's helped the Dragoo family as well. So you can take the same story, just modify it from different angles, and that gives you additional content, but it doesn't take you out of the campaign theme as well. If you have certain accomplishments, this is probably not the time to talk about all of those right now. I know at the end of the year, you'll hear some appeals that will say, this 2015 was a heck of a year. We did all of these wonderful things. Well, in reality, a lot of those wonderful things are great, but I didn't see, witness, were a part of that, and I'm really caring and passionate about this, and I really just want to make sure that this person is helped. So focus less so much on that. And that is another opportunity, again, where during your automated response, after a person makes a donation, you send them over to a page in your site. And on that page, you talk about accomplishments, things that you've done, the families that you're helping at this end of year too as well. It's good always to have some specific gift options at potentially different levels. You can, and this is where you can really, really help out to provide different levels to different segments. So for instance, if we had our lowest level givers in that group in our email, then we had our mid-level, we could start out, if you remember in that other email I showed you, it had $100 as the amount. That was for a mid-level donor. So the rest of them could start out, say, 25 or 50 versus the $100. So you can change that amount, even though they could go to your page, your donation page, and insert the amount they really want to have, but you can try to influence them before is ideal. It's always good to sort of brainstorm angles of the story in email to make them more actionable, and to try and get to a point where you can say, our goal in this piece is to ensure that this email makes the person act now because we gave them these 2 points. Determine what the 2 or 3 points are that you think relate to the action for them to go. If you are having a tough time coming up with those, you probably have a much larger email than you really need. Be as concise and, of course, as you can, and all the elements of good solicitations that we've talked about definitely need to be there. Do a universal find. Do you have the word you a lot in it versus we or us? Helping us? No, it should be you can make this possible for the Dragoo family now. This is where you make a real difference. It's not about the institution. It's about you helping somebody else. And of course, create that emotional connection through the donor's personal story. Remember that Environmental Defense Fund? It was very articulate with all of these very lively words. Don't try and use those words that we've had and that we've talked about in other sessions, which are things like, which definitely are what I call overarching words like impact and so forth, which are great words, but you could talk about the impact on the individual already. Then, when you're thinking about design, in general, there's a couple things to remember as you go through the design phase of this. First and foremost, is it appealing and does it actually match where you are with everything else? And does it lead the donor to the most important element, which is really donate? If you recall in that Bosma thing, remember that the triangle made your eye go down into the donate section. Very, very good. Send yourself the solicitation. Look at it on a desktop and look at it on your mobile phone. Very, very important. Make sure all the links work and direct them to the one place, which is the donate section. All right, so a couple last minute things before we get to some of your questions. Feel free to put those in here. In terms of email, it has to flow with the rest of the campaign theme. It has to match with the concept of what you're trying to do. You're going to open it strongly with a lead-in statement. of course. And then after that lead-in statement, you are going to draw the reader down into it to take an action. Even if you don't have a graphic designer, you're going to make that action into a block and into a button. Just you can do that in almost every single email tool that you have out there that could be used. A couple other things on the campaign stuff, and feel free to put your questions in here, of course, as we always like to end about 10 till the hour, but so we have a little bit of time for you here. But as we look at designing the campaign, the next session on October 6th is going to be really, really important for you to attend, because in that session, we're going to be talking through the timing and logistics of a multi-channel end-of-year campaign. So you don't want to miss that one. That's October the 6th, 2015 at 12 Eastern. If you haven't already, you probably will receive an email from Natalie Clayton on our team, who is going to ask to set up a time with you to do what we call a campaign kickoff meeting. That campaign kickoff meeting is a time for us and our team here, which will include our copywriter, our designer, Jeremy and others, our lead strategist on all of these campaigns, to sit down with you and talk about what are the stories we want to use for this end of year. What are the things that we want to make sure and talk about and highlight? Talk through the direct mail and talk through all of that, and start getting the process going of interviewing some of the individuals we would talk about and getting the designs going further. So look forward to that. Look forward to that, getting that email if you haven't gotten it, and please respond so we can get that time with you and your team. We're going to be doing those virtually, and so it'd be great if your team could be in one place, and obviously our team will be joining in several locations, but we'll show you our screens and you'll be able to see us, and so you can at least see the people that you'll be working with for this end of year campaign. All right, so I see that questions are coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and take this one. What about the subject line in the email? Good question here. So when we think about the email in general in the subject area, the thing to remember about subject lines is it should always relate to that statement below, that relevancy statement that we've had in the past. So statements that have not proven to work have been give to us today because we need your help, or we need this right now from you. But content that would have been, like, for instance, in the Bosma case, theirs was about jobs. And so their subject line was focused on, I think if I recall, it was something like today's most important thing is to get a job, or something like that. So we've gone away from doing direct donate now, give to us right now, the fundraising ask directly in the subject line, and push that into the appeal itself, because we do want a little bit higher opens as well. So that's who the subject line should be. It should tie directly into the copy concept. And then, of course, your 2-line piece would further explain that concept and then get into the solicitation in the email. In terms of the guidelines in length, sometimes that you should not, if you're having more than 5 words in a subject line, you need to test that and see how it views in your mobile. It's going to be tough. We try not to do so many words than that. The other thing is that it's okay from time to time to personalize within the subject line. Like, Derek, what was your first job like? And using that potentially, not necessarily on the first one, but you could use it in the second email. Because what I mean by first and second is that at the end of the year, we're going to have 2 to 3 different emails. And so the first one would be that opening one, that second, that to create the baseline. And then the second one would be from a different angle, and that might be where you would want to insert the name. There is one exception to this, though, is that it is December 31. The subject line should be, you need give today, to make a gift today before the end of 2015. It needs to be very, very clear what that is. So that's the only exception to most of this. So if you were doing a third email in the spring solicitation, you obviously wouldn't use that subject line. So that's the only difference. All right, the next question is around imagery and stock photography. Derek, we don't have any good images. Any suggestions? The 2 things you can invest in that I would highly make sure that you do would be in photography. An image transcends generations An image is the most emotional pulling piece, and an image is one of the strongest pieces that you could ever have to inspire somebody to give, whether it be in print or whether it be online. It's a good investment. If you don't have any, our designer here does have some recommendations on some really good stock photo sites, but the really good ones actually charge a couple $100 to use them because they're really good. They're real people and it looks not like in a manufactured area. You could spend maybe that same amount of money having a photographer come by. So it's an investment worth doing completely for sure. It's an important one that can be used not only in the fundraising appeals but in other areas. Derek, you mentioned social media. Will you not be creating any social media messages? We won't be creating any solicitation type messages for social media. Yes, that's true. Because again, the rates and stuff, what's going on. Now, we will recommend to you that you share the stories that are used in the direct mail appeals, and it's okay to just reference that, give today, especially on December 31, make a lasting gift today before the end of the year, something like that. But in terms of just you sharing that content, you'll have the content to share. The reason, again, we're not doing too much of focus on that is because as a fundraising tool, it's not ideal. It doesn't raise as much money and time and energy that we would need. And in terms of the next question here, this question is around landing pages. Derek, I've heard you say in the past that the landing page needs to relate to the concept and theme. Is that true for email as well, or can you direct them to the donation page? No, that's true for email too. But email, once we have the donate button, we're going to take them to a donation page. And on there would be ideal to have some similar imagery that was used. So that would be a banner. And that banner would be something that we'll be giving you to as well. All right. So just to recap a couple things here. Look for an email from Natalie Clayton that will have when that we're going to try and schedule your client kickoff meeting for the campaign. Make sure to mark your calendar on October the 6th. We're going to talk through the logistics of everything. Check out the achieveguidance.com/FOCF. That's achieveguidance.com/FOCF. You'll be able to get this session handout, which is the presentation, as well as to be able to view this session in a recording. If you have any questions, let myself or my colleague Jeremy Morse know. You have his email too. He's been reaching out to you. Thank you so much. Looking forward to connecting with you very soon on our campaign kickoffs. Take care.